Olha, o tema agora é Fatores Humanos versus as Novas Tecnologias. A responsabilidade no comando e os critérios para o uso da tecnologia no sentido de resultados positivos para a operação. Chamo agora o nosso convidado internacional, Capitão Vergis, instrutor de voo na Bell Helicopter Textron em Chicago. Onde está? Por favor. Captain. Captain.
Thank you, Miguel.
It's a pleasure being with you. Sorry, I do not have your resume, even a brief resume here. I'm sure you are a lot more than just flight safety officer. Please show yourself, present yourself, please.
I'll give those of you who might require the fine services of our translators an opportunity to put your headsets on for the translation from English to Portuguese, as my Portuguese is limited to 1 or 2 words. Neither one are appropriate for a public group. But I thank you. I thank you for inviting me. I thank you for the Abrafi organization for this opportunity to come and present some thoughts and ideas. My name again is Vergis. I'm the Flight Safety Officer for the Bell Training Academy, located in Fort Worth, Texas. My home was in Chicago. It's where my flying career began, with the Chicago Fire Department. I had the pleasure of being in that department for 33 years before my retirement in 2010. And the last 26 of those years were spent in service at the aviation unit. And when I left there, we were flying Bell 412s. So like many of you, I was at the pointed end of the spear point of helicopter operations, like many of you. And this is where much of the responsibility for our success lies. And this is where we're going to be spending some time talking about this. So I left after my retirement in the fire department, went to work for Bell Helicopter, and am now the flight safety officer. There was some time preceded in this role of current role of mine as a flight instructor there at the training academy, which I'm very proud to say I was started my experience there as a 412 flight instructor, mostly in classroom and in the simulators, flight training devices, because of that experience as a line pilot, as a supervisor, as a chief pilot, and flight instructor, and finally the manager or the chief of that aviation unit, helicopter aviation unit in the fire department. So it was that experience that I brought, like so many of our flight instructors there at the training academy bring to that organization. So I'm happy to see many of you, some of you, my former students there in Bell 429 instruction that I provided, both in the classroom and in the flight training devices before they went on to get the actual flight training. So I'm very proud of those of you who found some success. I hope that was as a result of that training that you received there from Bell Helicopter. And since my last visit here in Sao Paulo, this is my second visit to Brazil. My first experience was in August of last year when I came and talked about some of the same things that we're going to be talking about today. This will be presented in a little different manner today. But when I was in Sao Paulo for that Bell Safety Symposium, we were talking about safety once again. And since that time, I've been traveling, representing Bell Helicopter, talking about the same thing on every continent on the globe. I have been in, just in this last year and a half or so, I've been on every continent talking about things that affect pilots, mechanics, operators at every level. And I want to thank you for, I want to thank Bell for that opportunity, and thank you for participating in this as well. Credit goes to you. If anyone in your organization or any auditor perhaps might ask you, do you receive or have you received safety training? Some people might be hesitant to answer the question. They're not sure. What are they asking? What do they mean? This is safety training. So what you derive from this is that benefit of awareness on a topic that's kind of hard to define at times. We struggle with this. We're trying to make science out of it in every way that we can to help measure our progress in how we're doing. And I want to commend all of you, in addition to the organizations that you're here as a part of, Abrafi being one of them, that have been working so many, just exhaustively. I mean, this never ends, this task, this pursuit that we're attempting. In addition to representatives from ANAC and organizations like SANIBA, and organizations like the HAI, the Helicopter Association International, and organizations like the International Helicopter Safety Team. These are all resources and organizations that are trying to do something to improve the safety record, the reputation of this industry that we all represent, no matter what it is, no matter what role we play in the organizations that you are representing and that you work for, no matter if it's as a pilot, as a mechanic. I should ask the question. The last time I was here, most of the room were technicians and mechanics and engineers. How many mechanics and technical people do we have in the room here today? By show of hands. How many of you are pilots? Okay, this is the group that we were missing the last time I was here. Good, it was worth the trip to come back. Now, how many owners are in this room? By show of hands. I'm going to take a minute. Are you the only one? I'm sorry, but I have to think. I didn't see that. Safety. I want to thank you. Just you? You're the only owner. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you. Thank you for coming. The reason I asked that question is because of the emphasis that is being placed on safety and safety training by everyone involved in the organization, the importance of this. Because the last time I was here, the reaction and the response that I got from the group, mostly technical, was that they were very happy that excuse me. They were very pleased to hear the message that was delivered, and they wished that many more of the owners and the operators, the CEOs of the organizations, were there to hear that message. Because it's that important that all of the technicians, all of the pilots, all of the people, the dispatchers, everyone that is involved in the operation, all the way up to, as was pointed out earlier in the first presentation, the need for this message to go all the way to the top of the organizations that are operating helicopters. Everybody needs to be involved in this, and we are doing our best across all of the organizations and across all of the industry, by the manufacturers and the operators, everyone, to make sure that this message goes through to and reaches everyone involved in helicopter operations. Because after all, we are, whether we consider ourselves leaders or not, in our individual organizations, we are all leaders because people are looking at us, at what we are doing and how we are doing it, especially those of you in this group. And I know there's a great deal of experience in this group. There are others who are just entering their time in this industry, and they're watching us. What are we doing? How are we doing it? Are we conducting ourselves in a safe manner in order to be the stewards of the industry that we are? We are stewards of an industry. This helicopter industry has been around for quite a long time, many decades more than we have in helicopter operations, many decades more than I have in experience in helicopter aviation. So this was already there. This was a thriving industry when we stepped into it. And now we are the ones who are going to be responsible for making sure that there's a viable and successful industry, a helicopter industry, for us to pass on to those that will follow us. So this is something that we hope to succeed in. So what we're going to be talking about a bit today is acceptance of new technology. When we look at this new technology / human factors, we have one aspect of operations here with technology and another aspect here with human factors. They seem to be a little bit polar. They're on opposite ends of the spectrum at times. We're going to talk about how it is that we can succeed in combining these in order to operate successfully and safely. Part of our success is ensuring that we go home in the same condition that we have arrived at work as pilots, as technicians, and everybody involved in the business of helicopter operations. But then on the other side of it, we have the human factors. This is where we have not been doing so well. We talk about the numbers, the successes that all of the named organizations are doing, and individual efforts, by those of you in this room, are doing to ensure that we're doing the correct, making the correct decisions. And as a result of that, we have seen from the statistics that have been collected by the IHST, the International Helicopter Safety Team, and Helicopter Association International, all of the 10 years of accident statistics that those two organizations have been collecting since 2005. They had a 10-year goal, collectively, with our help, of reducing accidents by 80%. Now, some announcement will be made at the organization, the Helicopter Association International meeting coming up next year in the US, that will make some announcement as to how well we did as an industry. I think we're going to find out that we did not reach the 80% reduction in accident goal. I think that what we are going to find out that it's going to be somewhere around 53%, which is significant. And that's progress. We're glad that through all of their efforts, publications, the internet websites, the information that is available to us, the pilots and operators, free of charge, all of the efforts that have been put in have caused or been, will result in that reduction in accidents. So good for us. The problem here is that as we look at some of those statistics, the mortality rate or the fatalities are not really coming down at that same rate. We're actually really killing more people, more of our passengers, more of our pilots in those accidents. An example, the last week in November, there were 2 accidents that occurred in a country on the Asian continent that killed 17 people in 2 accidents. There were 13 killed in 1 accident, 4 killed in a separate accident, and 12 more injured in that accident that killed the 13 people. So we're not going to survive as an industry. We're not going to do well as we would like. Now I know that the economies of the countries everywhere in the world are kind of leading to a drawback in some of those operations and some of the business of helicopters. So we're not going to blame the accidents on everything. We know that there's a lot of what is going on in Brazil, going on everywhere in the world. So we're challenged by economics. But we need to do our part to ensure that people our customers have the confidence that we can provide them with safe and efficient transportation. So how are we going to do that? This is going to be where we'll start the conversation about technology. Now, just at the outset of this, we use terms like automation and technology and machines, and each of them may technically be different from one another in some eyes, but for our purposes, in our conversation today, we're going to just lump them in. So if I use the word technology, or if I use the word automation, or machines, or machinery, we're going to lump them into the same category, even though technically they may be different in some regard or another. So, let's look at this. How many of you remember when our cockpits looked like this? Okay, all right, me too. Those of you who are been around a while and learned how to fly initially in gas-powered reciprocating engine helicopters, remember that all we had to look at was a manifold pressure and airspeed, altitude, and a few gauges related to oil pressure and fuel. So good for us that have been around that long and have survived that part. And many of you still may be operating aircraft, reciprocating engines, still a good engine, still a reliable engine for applications in personal use mostly, or maybe some in law enforcement and some in electronic news gathering. There's still a place for this type of, it's hard to call it technology, but it is. Pedostatic systems and cable-driven tachometers and RPM indicators. So now, how have things changed for you? For some of us, maybe most of us. Now what are we looking at? Holy cow, what happened to our instrument panel? Is there anything on here that anybody recognizes anymore? We see a lot of the same gauges, but the displays are, the displays were designed to look like those mechanical instruments that we were once familiar with, so that we wouldn't have to change so much in how it is that we are understanding the information that is being provided here. Engine information, fuel quantity indications, everything is electronic. The sources in many cases are the same. The pedostatic system is still alive and well in the aircraft whose instrument panel we see here, in this case the 412 EPI, right? The latest iteration of the 412 EP. So now instead of mechanical instrumentation, we have computerized displays. All these are just TV screens, basically. Well, how did that information get there? Well, somebody sat down with the engineers and said, look, we understand there's a lot of benefit that could be derived from using head-up displays and things that are, gauges and indications that, but what we really want to make this transition easier for our pilots is to make the attitude indicator, the HSI, the airspeed indicators, to look like what it is that we're used to seeing. Can we do that? Well, yeah, but we have this other newfangled type of idea about displays and what they could look like. We know, but can we just make it look like, okay, all right. And we clustered these displays in a manner that instead of looking here and there and up and left and right, we can kind of concentrate those displays in areas where we can kind of get a glimpse at everything at a glance. So now we have computers that are controlling the information that we're getting from the engines. Again, same technology for the navigational information. So now we have, instead of ADFs and NDBs and all that stuff, we have GPS. All right, can we put that on a display? Can we make a map out of that so we can see where we are relative to other airspace, relative to ground references and those sorts of things? Can we do that? Well, yeah, we can do that. Okay, let's put a map on here, and actually that one would go in that area in this display. Or in the case of those who might require a televised view from a camera underneath the aircraft, that can be used there instead of the GPS. And then we have AFCS, automatic flight control systems, that can integrate the control of the aircraft with an autopilot. What might that do for our workload? Some of us would say, yeah, that's going to improve our work, our ability to fly the aircraft, navigate. But there are others who might say, you know what, I just not that comfortable with the technology. What are we going to do? How are we going to strike this balance? Make it available, certainly, for those who might want that, but others might struggle a little bit. And what we're going to be talking about today is how we are managing that process. Is it helpful? Is it not? Who is it helping? How can we help those who it's not helping? Sometimes we look at some of the ideas that, especially the mechanics that are in the room, we talk to them about how they have compressed and stuffed all of this machinery under cowling where there's this much clearance and you can't even get your hand in there to operate these things. So who designs these compartments? Engine compartments and transmission compartments? Engineers. Well, evidently those guys have never worked on a Bell 412 or any of the other aircraft of other manufacturers that aren't so easy to work on. So are they talking? We're talking, Bell is doing what we can to get customer advisory boards, CABs. We're trying to get the people together, the users and the engineers, and put them together in the same room for months and months at a time to figure out what will work best. Instead of the engineers just driving this to a degree, to a point to where we're wondering when this is going to end. And it seems to be, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so. It seems to be coming at a faster and faster pace. This stuff is coming across to us and we're wondering just when is it going to end? And I don't think it's going to, not anytime soon. Because technology continues, in some cases, to improve things. So is this a positive or a negative? That's the question. Some of this is generational, as I pointed out. A guy like me, or guys like those of you who learned in recips before turbine-powered aircraft came along, and even those turbine-powered aircraft were in their most basic form when we first learned to fly. Now we get some of this technology that we see, and we see the younger generation of pilots and operators coming along and picking it up just like that. Just like that, that quickly. And we wonder, it leaves our heads spinning. So, is this improving our workload? Some will say yes. If you're flying long distances over areas, over terrain that might not be familiar to us, GPS and those types of, that type of technology can be of great assistance. Setting up an autopilot to carry us even a whole flight plan, some that involve different legs with different directions along the way. And then we monitor, important issue here, that we continue to monitor that The machines are operating properly. The technology is operating properly. So how prepared are we when we get in that Bell 429 or any other aircraft that has a high degree of technology built into it? Are we prepared? Now, here's where we get into the hazardous attitudes. These are things that we can't help. You've all heard about them. We've all learned about them as pilots. So why are we talking about this again? Well, these two go together. These two absolutely go together. Because of the human factors, the performance numbers that we have said, that we've talked about, we still are at, even though the numbers of accidents are on the decline, they're decreasing. The percentage of human factors accidents, or accidents that have human factors as a contributing factor, at least, still remains at about 80% globally. Are we really prepared? Is this technology really helping us? What are we doing? What can we do? We know we're not doing the right thing, and that's not enough for me to come up here and tell you that. You already know that. What sort of tools can we use to improve our performance? Some of it involves decision making, but we're going to talk about these as we go. Many of us have said this in our careers. We've been around for a long time. Somebody comes up with a new idea. Maybe an idea that we've heard before. Maybe an idea that we've heard 10 times before. Maybe we've tried out this new idea of somebody's who thinks it's a new idea. No, we've been there before. It didn't really work out that well. Yeah, but that was in a different environment, different working environment. Now we have better performing aircraft, and we have better technical information, technological information for weather forecasting and those sorts of things. Weather observations. Better technology for weather observations. What does that tell you about an operator, about operations in coastal areas? Some of you know full well what the weather is going to do, even without the current conditions being known. Everything's fine right now. We can go. But wait a minute now. Experience tells me that things are going to change at sunrise. Conditions are going to change at sunset. So you have that experience. But every once in a while, we have to be careful. Even those with experience, we have to listen carefully to some of these ideas so that we don't land up falling in the trap ourselves. Don't tell me. Don't tell me. I can do this, and I can do it quickly. Are we doing the right thing? Are the conditions always going to be such that we can do this quickly without consideration of processing all of the details of what is going to go into this decision that I'm getting ready to make? I won't fail. I've done this 100 times and never experienced failure. We have to be careful. If we hear ourselves saying that or thinking that, we better step back and be careful about the decision we're getting ready to make. Because like many of the advisors that would advise us on how to invest money, at the end of the advertisement, they'll tell us, past performance is no guarantee of future success. Oh, wait a minute, maybe I better put my money back in my pocket. Or maybe I better delay this decision. We better be careful. Don't act too quickly without considering, because you've done it before may not necessarily mean that you will be successful this time. I can do this. I can do this. So if we've ever heard ourselves say these things, we need to, here's another one. I'll just do this any way I can. Here, this one, we oftentimes find ourselves in situations where it's too late to make a good decision. We've narrowed ourselves into a corner, into a funnel, where we have left no way out. And we hear ourselves saying this, I'll just get this done any way I can. I'll rely on my experience because I've done it before. We'll talk a little bit about how we land up in places like these and why in this discussion. So if any of these phrases sound familiar, we may not be as prepared as we think we are. Again, whether it's technology related or not, it's a message worth discussing. So we recognize this as anti-authority when people tell us, regardless of their experience, don't tell me. When we hear ourselves saying, I can perform this quickly, this might be an indication of impulsiveness. Impulsiveness. I won't fail. This could be a sign of invulnerability. None of us are invulnerable. None of us. We don't have to prove it. There are plenty of empty chairs in this room to prove that we are not invulnerable in our attempts to succeed at times. I can do this. Macho. Never mind those guys over there that say it's not safe to fly today. Come on, boss. I'll take you. My pal. How do they get away with it? You know better than to take that flight. How do they get away with it? Don't they realize the risk that they're putting their passengers to? Don't they recognize the risk that they're putting themselves to? Maybe even the aircraft. That might be the only aircraft that you have available to you, and your job depends on their aircraft not falling victim to disaster. How do they get away with it? They've done it 100 times before. I'll just do this anyway. All right, that's the guy or the gal, who finds themselves with no other way out. It's resignation. This is something that they're going to have to accomplish, and they're going to rely on that experience again to get them out of trouble. And are they ever going to admit it? Not if they succeed, not to anybody else. Maybe they'll tell themselves, thank God nothing bad happened. I will never allow myself to get into that situation again. We talk about words like complacency. But it's not always complacency that gets us into this kind of trouble. It's another term. We're going to talk about that in an upcoming slide. So, are we prepared? How have we prepared? Engineering. Those are the guys who have all the answers for us, right? They're going to fix everything in our lives. They're going to invent things like computers to make our lives easier. Somebody in here has got to be laughing. I know it's hard to imagine that even 30 years ago, we were looking at computers being something that we thought we would never be able to succeed in operating. Things like this technology, cell phones, which can be the biggest problem at times for us as pilots, right? Because we can't resist the opportunity to answer that call or answer that message. We'll stick that device up underneath the headset if we don't have the Bluetooth technology already, or to quickly answer that text message. One of the things that I talk about, those of you who have been to the Bell Training Academy will remember, be careful about how you use these devices in the aircraft. Because even if the result is not an accident, if it does result in an accident, this can be a contributing factor as a distraction. And correct me if I'm wrong, the SANEPA people in here may ask you the question, did you have one of these devices? Was it active in the cockpit when you were flying the incident or accident aircraft? And they're going to know the answer before they even ask you the question. Because the record of activity, times, dates, duration, who you called, or if you answered an incoming call, is recorded by the service provider. That record is available to the investigators. So we don't want any of you to fall into that trap. Now you might say, well, I use that technology, yes, but it was to notify the dispatcher as to my location along my route of flight, or I use this device to get information about weather observations, weather observation information from stations along my route of flight. So if it has to do with the safe outcome of the flight, you may have a defense. Or if maybe something in your procedures, practices and procedures for your company may include, yes, you need to notify your dispatcher because the radio reception is not good in the mountainous area. This works, so use this device to notify flight following or your people in your company that are tracking your progress. Okay, so be careful about how you use this. Don't use this to call home and say, well, I'm going to be late for dinner tonight. Oh, really? Again? So be careful. Those kinds of conversations can be the distraction that you don't need, regardless of whether or not you have had an accident, because you never know when that is going to happen. So be careful about how you use this. So engineering, cell phones, technology, computers, and the things that are being included as things that will help you in the operation of your aircraft. All right, so let's talk a little bit about this engineering and this technology, how it came to be, what we're doing, and how we're interpreting some of this. It might help us to understand a little bit about why it is there. So, our engineers are always hoping to solve the human problem. That's there in italics. Because we cause 80% of the problems that we experience in aviation. So there they are to help us. Thank you very much. Some of it is helpful, and as we'll see, some of it may not be. So they try to design things that people can use. Are they always successful? For some of us. Maybe for none of us at times. There is some technology, I can't think of an example, but there's some technology that doesn't work out very well for us at all. So systems should be designed for safe, effective, and efficient use. That's the goal. That's the goal of our customer advisory boards. Okay, we have some technology here that we're going to be able to give you more payload. How are we going to do this? Well, fly-by-wire. Can we do that? Yeah, I think we can. I think that technology is bordering on proven in most cases. So here Bell Helicopter is going to give more payload to the new 525, the new model 525. Fly-by-wire aircraft, less weight because we don't have push-pull rods and controls that are going through the aircraft to the control surfaces. More computers. They're going to have to be proven to be effective before they will get certified by anyone in the world. FAA, EASA, ANAC. They're going to have to prove their reliability and safe and effective and efficient for use by us. So, automation has generally improved safety, comfort, and for most of us, job satisfaction. It's great when our destination appears out of the fog in limited visibility. It's proven itself. Holy cow. Oh boy, isn't he a great pilot? Or isn't she a great pilot? Look at that. Our destination appeared as if by magic. That pilot guided his way to us and to our safe arrival. With a little bit of help. So that's satisfying for most of us when we get credit for some invention that was installed in our aircraft. Here we are. We're more comfortable. Automation, air conditioning, that's part of technology, improved our comfort from the days when we had to open up a window in the cockpit, open up the sleeve of our flight suit and allow air to pass through from one sleeve and across our chest and out the other sleeve. I remember doing that. Our 412s, as great the technology and great aircraft that they were, did not have air conditioning. In Chicago in the summer, it got hot. And that was our ventilation system. Open up this sleeve, close up the flight suit all the way to your neck so none of that air escapes before it goes all the way through to the other sleeve and out the other side. And of course, safety. It's proven itself. We know that the technology, automation, and much of what has been provided to us through engineering, improvements in engineering, has improved the reliability of the aircraft that we're flying. So good for them and good for us. But it has led to some problems, and some of them safety related. Sometimes these things don't act the way they're supposed to. Computers in particular. So we have to be watchful. We have to be vigilant in our observations of how the equipment is operating. So even though the engineers will tell us that we are unnecessary, people, pilots, are unnecessary. We can do all of this with technology, and we don't need people flying the aircraft anymore. Drones, UAVs, increasing in popularity, and they're going in more and more places in the world. The military is using them with a great deal of success. Would we know if they didn't? I'm not sure that we would. We don't always hear about all of the failures of equipment in the military, unless they become very publicly, that information becomes public because they landed an aircraft in the middle of a city somewhere. That hasn't really happened. So we're doing our best to remain an integral component, an important component of the cockpit. And we'll talk about some of the reasons why. The technology and engineering does change the nature of our work. When we have hydraulic boost, we're not having to work as hard. And that autopilot system that will control our direction of flight with just the turn of a knob. But we need to know when to turn the knob, and how much to turn the knob, and what buttons to push. So it does not eliminate the work. In some cases, it makes it easier. In some cases, for those of us who aren't used to this, or aren't adapting very well, remember that word, it's making it harder for some of us. But in any case, it is changing. It's making the nature of our work different. We know that. So here's the case for us. Machines. We put these in categories. The case to keep the humans, the machines are dumb. Now some might say that they're getting pretty smart. They're getting smart about the things that they have been designed to do. But that's all that they will do. And they perform pretty consistently. Not all the time, but pretty consistently. They're only going to do what they were designed to do. Consider the light switch. We flick the switch up, the light goes on. Considering there's power and a good circuit and a light bulb that isn't burned out. That's what it'll do. Flip the switch, light goes on. It's only designed to do those sorts of things. They are rigid. They're only going to do the things that they have been designed to do, and nothing more. And as a result, they are unimaginative. And they're insensitive to change. If all of those considerations that we talked about, a viable circuit, power, and an effective piece of equipment, an operating piece of equipment, they're insensitive to change. For the most part, they're going to do the same thing every time. Now, what about us? Humans are creative. Humans are flexible. Some of us more than others. Okay, I get it. The captain may not be considered to be flexible in all cases. There are personalities, varieties of personalities that we want to mix in with this as well. We acknowledge that. But even they can change their course of action when conditions and circumstances change. That's humans. Humans are resourceful. Some of the things to consider, some of the jams that you have found yourselves in and managed to escape disaster somehow or another because of your resourcefulness. Most everyone in this room, whether it had to do with flying, or explaining to your spouse why you're late for work, or explaining to your children why you have missed their birthday. We're resourceful. Come up with an idea, something that's acceptable, that will get us through this problem. Improvisational comes into the same category. We can improvise when necessary, and we have to be careful about that one too. I talked about this to the mechanics when I was here a year and a half ago. Some of us will be applauded, rewarded, given a pat on the back for improvising in some maintenance type of an operation. We didn't have the tools that we needed to do this correctly, to conduct this inspection, or to conduct this repair. But we made it work. Somehow or another, we used tools that weren't designed to do what we needed to do and got the job done. And in record time, even though we were exhausted. And there we were. Good job. Here's a certificate for you. Here's a bonus. Attaboy, attagirl, thank you. You showed creativity. Now, 5 or 6 months goes by and you do the same thing in another circumstance, in another situation, you improvised. And things went south. And it became to be known as a contributing factor to an accident, where you saved a whole lot of time but left the tool that was found underneath the cowling, as was pointed out in one of the previous, I think in your presentation, George. Now what? You saved all kinds of time, but look what happened. A tool was found in there, or an accident was caused because the mechanic didn't put the safety wire on a particular castellated nut where it belonged. He saved time. And now it resulted in an accident. What's going to happen to that individual who was rewarded 5 or 6 months prior to that? You're fired. You caused the accident. You're responsible for this. We can't have this in our organization. I'm sorry. That was a willful decision that you made not to put that safety wire on that. So now we're a bump. So we have to be careful about how we improvise. We must be attentive, one of the things to our credit is that we are attentive to change. Sometimes not so attentive to change, as we see. As a flight instructor, I've had a front row seat to this, and those of you who are involved in flight instruction know how many times, or those of you who provide instruction in simulators, when you flip that switch for the failure and someone does not see the indication, it goes by unnoticed for minutes, sometimes for the whole rest of the flight. So, as a group, people are attentive to change, but sometimes we miss some of those things. Sometimes we miss those indications because that indication is just a little tiny light, or there's no audio associated with it. And we run into problems. But this is to our credit. Most of us are attentive to change. So now the case for automation. Machines are reliable, more so than they ever have been. And I suspect they're going to become more and more reliable as technology continues to further improve. Machines are precise, they're orderly, and they're logical. They're going to do what they were designed to do in most cases, and if they're operating properly, this is the expectation. We come to rely on their reliability. But humans on the other side of this discussion, we're vague. Many of us are disorganized, or maybe not as organized and predictable as the machines might be. We're illogical, emotional, and at times distractible. We become distracted with our own thoughts sometimes. We might think that we're capable of multitasking. We hear that word a lot. And we have to be careful, even when we're using it, even when we're using that word to describe ourselves. I don't think there has been an example of anybody who could do more than one thing at a time. We change our focus in what it is, and we reprioritize what it is that we are doing. That's one of the things that we can give ourselves credit for in our flexibility. Because we can reprioritize. Something has come up that's changing. We had a set of priorities established at the beginning of the flight, and this is how we were going to use it. Circumstances changed, and now we're going to need to do something different. So, these are the things that kind of go against our own abilities, and we have to recognize these things when they happen. We have to have enough self-awareness about what it is that we are doing and how our environment is changing. And it does, it changes a lot. Even though we may be involved in routine operations, there are so many factors that can change in a given flight. Even a computer couldn't keep up with and account for all of the changes in weather, in performance, in the load of the aircraft. All of these, that's just a short list. I mean, there's 1,000 other things. Our own attitudes, the amount of sleep that we got the night before, about the conversations that we had with our coworkers or with our bosses. These are things that can change the dynamic in an instant for any one of us. We have to be alert to these changes and understand how it is that we're going to react. It could change a go or a no-go decision on any given flight. We have to be aware of that and prepared to adapt. Need to be prepared. Oh, look at that. How did I know that was going to... This culture that we operate in, that we talk about, the culture of those who are working with us and how we are adapting to our day-to-day for reasons that go to automation, technology, and other things as well. How are we adapting as a society? How have you survived all of this? Is it just luck? Are you that good? There are many capable pilots that are lying silently in their graves today, along with their passengers. We're going to talk more about them too, because they weren't able to adapt quickly enough in some cases. Training. This is how we are going to adapt. Receive training. Sometimes it isn't enough just to read a book about what it is that we're going to be doing. To use the guide, how to get through, to how to pre-program a telephone number in one of these devices. They're not always that good. Sometimes we need somebody to show us. Sometimes we need the long trip to Fort Worth, Texas, to the Bell Training Academy to learn the most recent and most accurate information about how to operate, or to the capable and knowledgeable flight instructor. Capable and knowledgeable, all right? Not just the guy that's in the phone book. We need to find out who can provide us with the most recent and most accurate information about how to control this beast. They're great when they're flying smoothly, aren't they? When the rotors are balanced and the engine starts in the limited and the amount of within the limits, the time limits, and within the temperature limits. They're beautiful. They're like sitting in a cloud. And when we deliver, here again, when we deliver our passengers to the destination. They come up to us as pilots and they say, "Captain, thank you very much. You did a beautiful job. He's an excellent pilot. You're an excellent pilot." Sometimes that's only because nothing went wrong, right? That's when we prove ourselves, is when we get somebody safely and successfully to the ground after a malfunction of one kind or another. What is going to help us do that? Or make the correct judgment and assessment of the situation? Training. Some of that comes with experience, but there's a myth associated with that too, where you have to be careful about. That experience can be training for a successful operation, but getting the proper training for the operation of this technology. The use of the helicopter, even though we may have stick and rudder skills, the technology can draw us into traps that we have to be careful about, and we have to be able to recognize. Is that caution panel segment that is illuminated, what response is going to be required for this? How soon do I have to get to the ground? The warning, the caution, is this a time-limited issue? These are the kinds of things that we have to learn in training. Now, because of the reliability of the technology, we will often, am I out of time? I'm sorry. Okay. I don't know what that said. We also have to account for skill loss. Okay, so recurrent training is going to be important as well. Thank you for that. Here's the experience myth. How many more minutes do I have, or am I done? How many? 10 more minutes? Oh, I'll be fine. Thank you. I'm sorry, I hope I wasn't boring you. Did you put her up to, who put you up to that? Did somebody over here put you up to that? The experience myth. This is something that we have to be careful about, because many of us who have this experience count this to our credit. And we've been successful because we haven't had an accident. And we tell ourselves it's because of that, and because of the insurance company being right behind us saying that, yes, that 6,000-hour pilot is going to be more value to you as an owner and as an operator than the 150-hour pilot. And in most cases, they're probably going to be right. But those of us we can't understand why we see the accident reports that show the 10,000-hour pilot that we knew, that we trusted, had a fatal accident. How is this possible? How is this possible? We all make mistakes, experienced pilots and inexperienced pilots. And we can't understand. It's easily explained when we see the 150-hour pilot who's had the accident. This was his lack of experience. It's an easy one. But what about the 10,000-hour pilot who has the fatal accident? We can't get our arms around that. We don't understand it. It doesn't make any sense. Here it is. We all make mistakes, but we learn non-compliance when the result is no consequences. This goes way beyond complacency, because any one of us in this room would be asked, are we complacent in our duties? And every one of us would, no. Every one of us would say, no, we're not complacent. We pay attention to what we're doing. We're not complacent. But here's this the next slide. Have we normalized deviation? Have we taken shortcuts? Have we improvised in the name of efficiency? Have we done things that are not according to the checklist? Have we even used the checklist because we had to get off the ground? We had our clearance, gotta go. Could be any one of 1,000 different excuses or 1,000 different reasons. We have normalized deviation, and I will guarantee you that the pilot that had that fatal accident, that was the result. If it was a human factors failure, is going to be because that pilot went below that line of perhaps his own, where he would draw the line for what is safe and what is unsafe. Now, we saw this one before. It's nice to know that we're all kind of talking about the same thing, using the same charts. affirmation, right? That's what this is. We reinforce one another in looking at this. And yes, the mishap rate did fall and slowly taper off with engineering and improved technology and equipment. And again, there was a drop when we introduced SMS processes and procedures, as was pointed out, and team training. Team training. Everybody understands what the goal is, not just the pilot or the mechanic, but everybody involved in operations. And here's where we are now. We need to understand where it is that we're going. What is going to cause the next drop, significant drop in the accident rate? And here it is. Personal behaviors, human factors. We have to take responsibility for what it is that we're doing professionally, as individuals and professionally. We want to protect ourselves, our passengers, the reputation of the company that we work for. How long is the company going to last if we have the next disaster? Not very long. Remember, complacency kills, and so does normalization of deviation. This is something that we have to do to earn our trust, earn the trust that has been placed in our hands every day in order to ensure our own success and the success of the industry. How many more helicopters are going to be purchased, even if we have the money to do it? If the industry, if the public has lost faith in what it is that in the service that we are going to be providing. So remember, we are in a global war on error. This is kind of a twist on words. Most of us are involved in fighting the terrorists, right? And preventing those types of activities. But this one belongs to us. And this was a contribution by Dr. Tony Kern of Convergent Performance in the United States. So be a participant in the global war on error and be part of this. Here's another one. We saw 100 others in another display, another slide. 0 injuries, 0 regrets. This is the one in conclusion for Bell. So I'm gonna forego this in the interest of time. All of us, in one regard or another, have lost people that we know or aircraft in our operations. We've had that experience. It's a terrible experience. We don't want to be responsible for that, and we want to make sure that we honor those whose lives have been lost. I'm just going to cut the microphone off next. So we want to honor the memory of those people by doing a good job and making sure that we give this industry and ourselves the best possible chance. So I thank you for your kind attention. I know that questions are going to be part of the end of the day, so we'll forego any of those questions for now, but I'll be back to answer any questions that you might have of me. Thank you very much.
Just a few seconds before you go downstairs, I'd like to ask you, that slide you showed us about, you told us about machines are dumb and humans are creative. You really sure?
Yes. Yes. Just ask my wife. She'll tell you. You're very welcome. Thank you.
May I ask you in Portuguese, Captain? May I ask you in Portuguese?
Of course. A follow-up to your first question?
Yes, the second one.
Yeah.
Let's go to the second
Computers are done. Yeah.
Você nos falou sobre automação. You told us about automation. How is automation involved in lack of situational awareness, and how lack of situational awareness drives to an accident?
Well, automation can cause this. Automation doesn't necessarily cause that problem. It's our understanding of how automation is properly used. And if in the final assessment, it is training in the proper use of the automation that will lead to our success. Is that your question?
Yes, and how is loss of situational awareness involved in an accident?
as far as I know, situational awareness is involved in 100% of the accidents. And how automation is involved in lack of situational awareness?
Laxity is the first answer to that question, because all of the automation and technology that we have available to us by using all of the electronic sources for navigation, like GPS and many other sources, can help us in a lot of ways in our ability to know where we are in terms of situational awareness geographically. So if we're not comfortable with using the technology, or if we are distracted in other ways from using the information, the accurate information that is available to us, that could lead us towards problems. Laxity, if we're not paying attention to the information that is available to us.
Yes, because situational awareness is one of the most important things in accident.
I agree 100%. And in response to your question about machines are dumb and humans are creative, that was a very good question, because there may be some definition that requires some clarification in the application of the word dumb. When we consider how machinery, consider the flight control system of a helicopter. It will repeat the same type of operation over and over again until such time as mechanical failure might come into play. Now, what I did when I went up the stairs might be considered dumb, because the markings were all there, the lights were lit, and I still tripped down the stairs. And it was because of, again, situational awareness. I didn't use those cues properly because I was trying to do more than one thing at once. Now, creativity on the other side is the human responsibility. Now, there's been a lot of progress made with regard to artificial intelligence in computers. Machineries, not so much. They're designed to do the same thing all the time. And therein lies the difference between some machines and some of the technology that we see. But it is still people who use their creative mind to develop that technology of computers as well. So that's the difference. Now, I adapted, right? When I tripped down the stairs, a computer that crashes and fails will sometimes not recover until such time as there's human intervention. So I broke my fall and didn't hurt myself as a result of my own mistake. But I hope that lends some explanation of what the use of the terms.
Thank you, Captain.
You're very welcome.